Chapter 1. Slaughter System. Southern Battle Administration Area. Greenwich High School. I knew it. Patricia is going to be the top graduate for our high school. With her S-level fire abilities, our school is going to get written into the history books. Finally, we have a chance of getting to the high school finals. Students chattered about the results for the final exams. Patricia Dunn, the top student, being the center of attention, didn't bother with what was going on around her. She stood alone by the window of the classroom. Her long blonde hair flowed in the wind, and she looked out into the distance with her blue eyes. Why did you give up, Lucas? Shouldn't you at least wait for the awakening procedure? Patricia looked down at her phone. It was a conversation with Lucas about him having to leave school. He was the only person able to compete with her in all the different subjects. Now that he wasn't around anymore, Patricia didn't feel the same. After awakening her S-level fire ability, no one was her match in the school anymore. She looked at the screen, hesitated, and typed a message in the message box. I know you might not believe it, but I'm the top student now. Her finger hovered over the send button for a few moments before she bit her lips and tapped it. Whoosh! The message was sent to Lucas, and there was only radio silence. Lucas Anthony looked at the message sent to him, and he shook his head. He felt so far away from everything. He vaguely remembered the school, all the students, and the teachers. The only thing he could vividly remember from his memory was how all of them kept silent when Jules Robertson, with the influence of his family, forced him out of the school. Lucas had just transmigrated to this world of fighting off demonic beasts and those with special powers called the Awakened. Things went well for the original Lucas until he met Jules Robertson. Jules Robertson had something going on for Patricia, and he mistook Lucas as a rival. Soon, things went bad for the original Lucas. Scholarships and funds required for his studies were rejected. And that's how the original Lucas was driven out of high school. Not being able to go through the awakening procedure also meant that the original Lucas's chance of being showered with riches and glamour was gone. Being an awakened in this world fighting against the demonic beasts guaranteed that you would lead a dangerous but rewarding life. Lucas looked at the message and he decided not to reply. He wasn't someone to dwell on things that were in the past, and he would rather spend his energy and effort to survive. He got out of his dark and tiny room to find work for the day. And when he closed the door behind him, an unfamiliar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to host for awakening the slaughter system. Kill to earn slaughter points. Gain and enhance abilities with slaughter points. Current slaughter points. 0/500. Host level 1. Lucas frowned at the information that appeared in his mind. Did that mean that he was awakened now? And what did it mean to be able to gain abilities with slaughter points? He knew that there was only one way to find out. Lucas walked for 2 miles to the nearest odd job market. As he was making his way there, he met neighbors who sighed and shook their heads at him. What a pity. Poor boy's an orphan, and yet fate isn't kind to him. At least he is still keeping his head up high. The neighbors were sympathetic to what had happened to him, and they respected the fact that Lucas, who was all alone in this world, didn't give up and tried to make his own living. When he got to the odd job market, it was bustling with activity. Men and women hustled to try and get a job for the day. With the demonic beasts constantly invading and destroying means of production, the cost of living had risen, and jobs had become hard to come by. A stark contrast with the rich and glamorous life of an awakened. Factory work for the day, $5 per hour. I only want builders with experience, $3 per hour. $10 per hour for heavy-duty work. I need those with the required strength. Employers shouted for whom they wanted, and hordes of these jobless men and women came surrounding them, trying to get an opportunity to be chosen. Lucas wasn't interested in any of it. He was searching and looking for something specific. After a few hours of wandering around, he finally stumbled upon the odd job he was looking out for. I need someone to slaughter livestock at the abattoir. No experience required. $5 per hour. A burly man with scars all over his body shouted. The pay was average, but slaughtering livestock wasn't for the faint-hearted, and so there weren't any takers. Seeing that no one responded, the burly man continued shouting, "Food is provided for the day, and as a retired awakened, I'm willing to teach anyone a skill or two." Some of the men and women passing by stopped and hesitated. They walked away after they got dissuaded by the stench of blood from the burly man's body. Lucas came up to him and said, "I'm interested." The burly man's eyes opened wide when he heard Lucas. However, he scanned Lucas up and down and said, "Shouldn't you be in high school or something?" Lucas shrugged and said, "Life happens." The burly man sighed, nodded and said, "Call me Bundy. Work's tough, but it pays the bills." Bundy stretched out his hand to Lucas for a handshake. "Thanks, Bundy," Lucas said and shook Bundy's hand. He could immediately feel the enormous strength of Bundy's grip. "You are really an awakened? Retired." That was a bonus to Lucas. If his slaughter system had really made him awakened, it would be great for him to learn about being awakened from Bundy. With that thought in mind, he followed Bundy to the abattoir. Chapter 2: New Ability? The abattoir wasn't too far away from the odd job market. Traveling in Bundy's car to the abattoir only took 10 minutes. When he arrived, the first thing Lucas noticed was the different varieties of livestock ready to be slaughtered. There were poultry, pigs, cows, and even domesticated demonic beasts. "Don't worry about those. I don't expect you to be handling them." Bundy tapped Lucas's shoulders as they walked by some domesticated demonic beasts that looked like deer and had fire horns growing out of their foreheads. Bundy showed Lucas to his workstation, and he showed him the way to handle the poultry. Be swift and decisive. Any hesitation is torture to the livestock. Bundy picked up a chicken, and with a swift move, he slit the throat of the chicken and let the blood out. "Now, here's your turn." He passed the knife over to Lucas. This was the test for Lucas. Some just couldn't bring themselves to take life, and some were just too timid for it. Lucas took the knife from Bundy and picked up a chicken coming down the line. Bundy looked intensely at Lucas as he saw him raise his hand. Slit. Lucas followed what Bundy did, and the chicken thrashed around for a few moments before going limp lifeless as the blood was let out from its slit throat. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Congratulations on host's first slaughter. Current slaughter points: 1/500. Host level 1. Bonus package for host delivered. Please pick one ability. 1. S-level fire ability. 2. S-level water ability. 3. S-level wind ability. 4. SSS level physique ability. Lucas looked at the information panel in his mind and thought for a moment. The S-level elemental abilities looked attractive. If he chose the S-level fire ability, he would be on par with Patricia, and even be more powerful than Jules Robertson. But he hesitated as he looked at the SSS level for the physique ability. There must be a reason for it to be SSS level, he thought. And with what he was doing, earning slaughter points in the abattoir, it might help him with that, and it wouldn't be so obvious to the others. Lucas decided, and he thought silently in his mind, SSS level physique ability. A familiar sound erupted in his mind again. Ding! Host selected SSS level physique ability. Initiating delivery. 10%. 50%. 100%. When it got to 100%, Lucas felt a surge of energy coming into his body. He could feel his clothes tighten as his muscles bulked up. His senses of the sounds and sights surrounding him heightened. Lucas could see, feel, and smell things he hadn't noticed before. Well done. Keep it up. I'll be at my station over there. Bundy was impressed with what Lucas did, and he felt comfortable enough to let Lucas do his work alone. Lucas nodded, and Bundy walked over to his own station dealing with larger livestock. Picking up another chicken, Lucas continued to swiftly slash the knife at the chicken's throat. Slit. To his surprise, he slit the head off the chicken's body. His increase in strength was apparent. Ding! Slaughter points +1. He quickly adjusted his strength and continued his work. Ding! Slaughter points +1. Slaughter points +1. Slaughter points +1. As Lucas gained slaughter points, he discovered that he got even stronger than ever. Not only that, when the livestock struggled and tried to peck and claw at him, he realized that his skin was now tough and impervious to the attacks. When he was done for the day, Lucas summoned the information panel in his mind. Ding! Current slaughter points, 160/500. Host level 1. It wasn't going as fast as he thought, so he thought about handling larger livestock the next day. Maybe slaughtering larger livestock would give him more slaughter points. Here's your pay for the day. Bundy handed $30 for 6 hours of work done. Will you come again tomorrow? Bundy asked as he was eager for Lucas to come by again. It was tough for him to find someone suitable, and it would be a waste if Lucas gave up only after one day. Definitely, Lucas replied, much to the delight of Bundy. Bundy's eyes opened wide at Lucas's response. Finally, he was able to find someone up to the task. But, Lucas said suddenly. Bundy frowned at Lucas as he waited for Lucas to finish his sentence. Was he going to negotiate for more money? Bundy didn't think of Lucas to be so impatient. Is it possible for me to handle larger livestock tomorrow? What? Bundy wasn't prepared for Lucas's request. He frowned and thought for a moment, even though Lucas's performance had exceeded his expectations. But Lucas might be getting too far ahead of himself, Bundy thought. Dealing with larger livestock was much more difficult than handling poultry. In the end, Bundy sighed and relented as he wanted to keep Lucas coming in for the job the next day. You can try, but if you can't handle the larger livestock, you have to go back to what you were doing. Bundy placed his hand onto Lucas's shoulder and said, Deal. Lucas agreed without hesitation. With that, Lucas knocked off for the day, and he decided to go to the burger joint for dinner. Welcome, Lucas. The waitress in the burger joint welcomed him with a cigarette stuck to the side of her lips. She narrowed her eyes and turned her head to the side. Lucas looked in the direction and saw some familiar faces. Patricia and the other students were also having dinner. Well, look who we have here. Is that who I think it is? Look at him now. Students murmured at Lucas's state that he was in. They covered their noses at the faint stench of blood that was emitting from Lucas's body even though he had cleaned up after work. To think that he was the only competitor to Patricia not too long ago. Patricia glanced over at Lucas from afar. Why wouldn't you reply to my message? She thought as she looked at the message thread with Lucas. Jules Robertson, who was sitting beside her, saw what she was doing, leaned closer and stole a glance at Patricia's screen. What he saw enraged him. How dare he snub you? Raging from within, he muttered to himself in anger. Chapter 3. Snobs. To Jules Robertson, people like Lucas were an eyesore. Deep within his belief, for someone without any family prestige and upbringing like himself, Lucas's good results were an anomaly. It was akin to being a sin for Jules Robertson. Only people who had a prestigious background like himself were worthy to be awakened. And how dare Lucas snub someone like Patricia? Her family, even though not as powerful as his, came from a lineage of soldiers defending the Southern Battle Administration area. Jules Robertson took a few deep breaths, narrowed his eyes and stared at Lucas. Thoughts on how to deal with Lucas went through his mind. However, he wasn't going to do it out in the open. He enjoyed more than anything else to silently and slowly making life difficult for Lucas, just like how he had done with cutting off funds for Lucas's studies. Jane, get me a beef burger with some fries. Don't think I'll be having it here, Lucas said to the waitress as he scanned the area where his old acquaintances were. He didn't want to bother with them, and he would rather not make any contact with them. Their worlds had been too far apart now. The waitress, Jane, nodded and closed her mouth, making the cigarette rise, pointing toward the ceiling. She walked back to the counter and wrote Lucas's order on a piece of paper, after which she placed the order through the order window connecting to the kitchen. Why isn't he saying hi to us? I don't remember he was like this. He had always been friendly. Maybe he is just feeling inferior with what he is doing now. One of the students said, and all of them kept quiet. Patricia looked at Lucas's tired face and attire. A sense of guilt came over her and she lowered her head. What was I thinking? She chastised herself for not being able to empathize with what Lucas was going through. Her last message to him felt so childish now, especially when faced with Lucas's reality of being on his own. You don't have to feel bad. He gave up on his own future. Jules Robertson saw Patricia's reaction and he tried to console her. He must have his difficulties, being an orphan and having to survive on his own. Patricia shook her head and refuted Jules Robertson. You are giving him too much benefit of the doubt. All these poor folks are poor for a reason. They give up at the slightest difficulty. All they want is life on easy mode. Jules Robertson couldn't help it and gave Patricia a lecture of his own. I don't think you can call his life easy. Patricia couldn't believe what she had heard, and she instinctively shifted a few inches away from Jules Robertson. Don't be fooled by them. They always have excuses. Jules Robertson tried to convince Patricia, but he knew it was too late from her body language. A fire raged within Jules Robertson, and he kept quiet and stared at Lucas. If you want to pester Patricia like a ghost, then I shall make you one, he said silently as he held onto a bottle of salt on the table and he crushed the salt bottle into pieces. Meanwhile, Lucas, who was waiting for his meal, pretended to be oblivious to what had transpired. He was, however, able to listen in to everything Jules Robertson and Patricia had said with his enhanced physique. Original Lucas wasn't awakened and didn't have the slaughter system to deal with Jules Robertson. It would be different now, Lucas thought. However, this meant that he had to try and increase his slaughter points as fast as possible to deal with Jules Robertson and what Jules Robertson had installed for him. Here you go. That'll be $7. Jane passed Lucas a brown paper bag. Thanks, Jane. Lucas gave her a $10 bill, turned around and walked away. Geez, you shouldn't have to. Jane tried to refuse his tip as she knew that Lucas was on his own, trying to make a living like her. But Lucas was too fast for her, and all she could do was look at his back, walking out of the burger joint and disappearing into the dark night. When Lucas got back home, he calmly ate his burger as he thought about what to do next. He would have to try and earn more slaughter points from handling the larger livestock tomorrow. And it was time to ask Bundy about registering and becoming awakened. From what Lucas had known, there were processes for him to go about doing that. After he finished his dinner and washed up, he placed a knife beneath his pillow before going to bed. Being cautious meant that you would live longer. Next day, Lucas woke up and he got to the abattoir first thing after he had his breakfast. There you are. Glad that you could come again. Bundy was all smiles when he saw Lucas keeping his word and showing up again. Why wouldn't I? Lucas shrugged and he glanced over at the area where the larger livestock were kept. Bundy frowned and he asked Lucas to confirm. You sure about dealing with the larger livestock? He was still worried about Lucas getting hurt by them. Don't worry. I know how to take care of myself, and besides that, I know you will keep me safe. Lucas replied with a shrug. Okay, let's start with the safer option first. Bundy led Lucas to his station where it was surrounded by steel barriers and there was a small opening for them to deal with the livestock. Watch me, Bundy said, and he demonstrated how he dealt with a pig for slaughter. The entrance opened and a pig entered, following the only path it had. When it got near, Bundy then grabbed onto the pig with his hands. Bang! The pig struggled and thrashed around the small enclosure. Bundy reached out to a huge knife with one hand while the other held onto the pig. Chapter 4. Fire Deer. Bundy, with much effort, was finally able to slit the throat of the pig. After that, he cleared the innards of the pig and hung the body of the pig onto moving hooks that transported them for cold storage. Wiping beads of sweat off his forehead, Bundy looked at Lucas and said, As you can see, it wasn't a walk in the park, even for me, a retired awakened. He panted as he tried to catch his breath. Lucas saw the difficulty, but he was determined to earn more slaughter points for the day. Don't worry, I'm ready. Seeing that Lucas was still keen on doing so, Bundy relented, and he let Lucas handle the next livestock. The entrance opened and another pig entered the path. When it got near, Lucas made a swift move and grabbed onto it. Bundy, standing beside Lucas, was ready to help out just in case. Any sign of distress from Lucas and he would go in and kill it off with his knife. But it was not warranted, as to his surprise, Lucas simply overpowered the pig. Could only squeal and try to struggle out of Lucas's grip. But it couldn't move as Lucas brought it down onto its knees. Slit. Then, with a swift motion, Lucas slit the throat of the pig. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter point +5. Current slaughter points 165/500. When he saw the information panel in his mind, he knew that he was on the right track. He proceeded to clear the innards of the pig and said, "Maybe I can try to handle something bigger?" Even though Bundy was impressed, he shook his head at Lucas's request. "Get used to it first. We shall see to it after lunch." After lunch? All right then. Lucas knew that he was being impatient, so he agreed to Bundy's suggestion. He continued to handle the slaughtering of pigs for the day until lunch. It wasn't boring to him as he tried out different ways to handle the pigs, slowly adjusting his technique as he gained experience. Finally, when he figured out the optimal way to strangle the livestock and slit its throat, he was 3 times as productive as he was when he started. Soon it was lunch and he ate with Bundy at the staff cafeteria. Eat more. Bundy was impressed with the strength that Lucas exhibited. A thought had crossed his mind that it was as if Lucas was an awakened. But he wasn't sure about it, so he kept quiet. There were cases of people becoming an awakened without going through the awakening process, but they were far and few between. Lucas munched on the fries, and when he finished them, he looked up and asked, "Bundy, do you know anything about registering as an awakened?" Bundy raised his eyebrows and said, "You've awakened? Me? No, I'm just a pretty normal guy." Lucas denied it as he wanted to continue coming to the abattoir to earn his slaughter points. Bundy frowned as he didn't believe Lucas. But he didn't want to blow Lucas's cover and said, "You can go to the Awakened Center to test and register as an awakened. They have tests and trials to gauge whether you are one. Don't be intimidated if they don't want to attend to your request. They are legally required to attend to anyone testing and registering as an awakened." Bundy took a bite off the piece of meat he had in his hand and continued, "After you are certified, you can then join in hunts and missions for dealing with demonic beasts. The rewards are much more than you could ever imagine." Rewards. Lucas got intrigued at the prospect of getting huge rewards. He could first earn slaughter points here in the abattoir, and when he was strong enough, he would then be able to try and take on these hunts and missions. "You've seen my performance in the morning. Maybe it's time for me to try handling something more challenging," Lucas said after summoning the information panel in his mind. Ding! Current slaughter points, 225 out of 500. Host level 1. His progress was much faster today with the higher slaughter points, and he was eager to get even more. Bundy nodded and said, "You can have a try, but let me remind you that it is much tougher than handling a pig." Lucas smiled at Bundy and said, "I know you would have my back." Bundy sighed and led Lucas back to the station. "Observe very carefully. The struggle is much more intense. Don't be scared by it." He briefed Lucas and gave the signal for the entrance to be opened. This time, when the entrance opened, a cow came charging towards Bundy. Bundy focused intensely as the steel barrier rattled from the cow, knocking onto it. He grabbed onto the cow's horn and held onto it. Bundy's body glowed for an instant as he activated his ability. The cow tried to shake Bundy's hand off but couldn't. With a tug, Bundy pulled the cow's head towards him, and he made use of the motion and slit the throat of the cow. "Are you still sure you want to do it?" Bundy panted as he put his hands on his hips. Lucas nodded with a determined look. "All right, since you insist." Bundy stood aside and gave the signal to those manning the entrance. The entrance opened and the temperature immediately heated up. A being entered the entrance and it wasn't a cow. "What the hell are you doing?" Bundy shouted at those manning the entrance. It was a domesticated demonic beast. Someone had angered it and let it enter. The fire deer, with its eyes reddened, was hurling fireballs at the steel barriers. Boom! Some of the steel barriers were blown apart and everyone else in the abattoir panicked. "Where is the security team?" Bundy shouted as he held his knife and stood his ground. "The security team is coming," one of the personnel shouted. Bang! The fire deer lunged at Bundy, and it knocked Bundy up into the air, hurling him across the ground. "Run!" Bundy spat out a mouthful of blood and shouted at Lucas. He tried to stand up but passed out from the impact. Chapter 5 First Battle. The fire deer turned its focus onto Lucas. Slowly, a fireball appeared in front of its forehead. Seeing what was happening, Lucas knew he had to act fast. He picked up a steel barrier that was on the ground and hurled it at the fire deer. Boom! The fireball shot at the steel barrier and an explosion ensued. Lucas took the opportunity and lunged at the fire deer with his knife. Hack! He swung his arm with all his might and the knife hacked into the body of the fire deer. The pain caused the fire deer to thrash around. Using its hind legs, the fire deer kicked at Lucas. Thud! The kick was too swift for Lucas, and he could only block it with his arms crossed in front of his body. With a muted thud, he felt a tremendous force hit his arms and send him tumbling across the ground. His forearms were sore and reddened from the impact. Lucas gritted his teeth and miraculously, the wounds on his forearms slowly subsided. He quickly swung his arms to see if they were all right. With his arms feeling as good as new, Lucas was glad that he had made the right choice with the SSS-level physique ability. It had not only granted him inhuman strength, but also the ability to heal and regenerate from wounds and injuries. The fire deer trampled on the ground in anger when it saw Lucas standing up from its attacks. It tried to turn and use its antlers to charge at Lucas. But Lucas was ready for it, and he dodged the fire deer's charge with a sidestep. He then grabbed onto the neck of the fire deer as it passed him by. Lucas, using one of his arms wrapped around the neck, summoned all the strength he had from the SSS-level physique. At first, he was dragged along on the ground by the fire deer, leaving a trail in the ground. But slowly, his strength began to overpower the fire deer. Couldn't move anymore, even when it tried to leap and thrash around. When it got desperate and tried to summon a huge fireball, Lucas knew he had to end it quickly. So, with his knife, he plunged it into the neck of the fire deer, severing the artery of the fire deer. Splatter! Blood spurted out from the fire deer's neck and splattered all over the place. The fireball that was getting larger at the fire deer's forehead stopped increasing its mass and slowly extinguished in the air. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 75. Current slaughter points 300/500. Host level 1. He sat down on the ground from the exhaustion. The next moment, he felt a surge of energy coming into his body from the slaughter points he had gained. Now, he could feel that he was twice as strong as before. Lucas picked up one of the steel barriers lying on the ground next to him and he gave it a twist. With ease, the steel barrier twisted like a piece of plastic. Lucas then glanced over at the control room where the staff controlled the release of the livestock. The few of them were now peeping out from the control room, looking at him and the dead fire deer not far away from him with astonished looks. Lucas focused intensely on each of them, trying to find any clues whether the release of the fire deer was intentional. This was too much of a coincidence to him. He stood up and walked over to the control room. Having blood all over his face and body, he looked like a devil as he approached the staff in the control room. One of the staff, a stout man, stood up and ran out of the control room. Lucas took note of the stout man and stared at the man as he left. Thoughts went through his mind, and he already had a hunch as to who might be behind this. "Hurry! Put on your gear!" In the security room, the security team leader shouted at his team members. He cursed at his bad luck, having to deal with a domesticated demonic beast gone berserk. It was 1 in 1,000 for it to happen, and now he was so unlucky that it happened on his watch. "Are you sure we can still make it in time?" one of his team members asked as he put on his body armor. The other team members also nodded their heads. Dealing with a berserk demonic beast without their gear and weapons meant immediate death for most people. And from the time they were activated till now, it wasn't looking good for Lucas and Bundy. "Shut up and get moving," the security team leader shouted at his team members. Finally, they were all suited up in their armor, pistols, and taser guns. They ran as fast as they could toward the area where Lucas and Bundy were. Along the way, other staff of the abattoir ran the opposite way. This gave the security team leader a sense of doom and gloom. It must have been a slaughter inside, he thought to himself. "Get into position," he shouted, and the team members got into an arrow formation, with the man holding the taser gun in front. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, the security team leader shouted, and the front man opened the door when the security team leader counted to 3. Every one of them tensed up as the door opened, with all of them expecting a tough fight. But the tough fight was not to be, as they saw what was behind the door. A young man covered in blood was tending to old Bundy. And most importantly, the fire deer was dead, lying on the ground motionlessly. "What in the world?" the security team leader and the other team members exclaimed when they saw what was in front of their eyes. Chapter 6. Pak Soon-hyun. All of them couldn't figure out how it was possible for the fire deer to be apprehended by the young man. It would take the 5 of them with full gear and weapons to be able to handle the fire deer. But now, right in front of their eyes, the fire deer was dead, without needing their help and intervention. "Are both of you all right?" After a few moments of silence, the security team lead asked Lucas. The other team members, with their weapons pointed at the fire deer, slowly approached the carcass of the fire deer. "I'm fine, but Bundy here might need some medical attention," Lucas said as he held onto Bundy's body, trying to wake him up. The security team lead nodded, and he radioed for an ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, Bundy opened his eyes and saw the security team lead with the security team members. Bundy frantically looked around for Lucas. He gave out a sigh of relief when he saw Lucas standing beside him and looking at him. "Thank God the security team came in time," Bundy said as he was put on the stretcher and carried away from the scene. Lucas smiled and nodded at Bundy. His eyes narrowed, and he made a decision when Bundy was out of his sight. There was no time to waste. He would go to the Awakened Center tomorrow to test and become awakened. With the identity of being awakened, those who seek to harm him would have to think twice before doing so. But first, he had someone else to deal with. After all the commotion, the abattoir ceased operations for investigations and recovery. Lucas took his pay for the day and asked around for information about the stout man. The other staff at the abattoir didn't think much of it, and they told him where the stout man usually hung out. Lucas thanked them, and he went over to the pub called the Dragon Lair. Inside the pub, it was dark and filled with smoke from the cigarettes. Rowdy men and women sat with a drink and cigarette in their hands. He lowered his head and sat in a corner as he quietly scanned the surroundings. "What do you want?" A waiter came up to him and asked. "Just a beer will do," Lucas replied and paid for the beer. The waiter looked at him suspiciously for a moment before he walked away. A few moments later, a familiar figure entered the pub. It was the stout man. And behind the stout man, Lucas saw a familiar face. It was one of Jules Robertson's minions, Park Soon-hyun. Pak looked out of place with his spectacles and studious looks. "Here's your beer." The waiter came over with Lucas's beer and placed it on the table. Lucas nodded and picked up the beer, while he looked at the stout man and Pak. They found a seat and the stout man started talking. The stout man gestured with his hands in the air as he spoke. "Guess what? The man you wanted me to deal with killed the fire deer just like that." He told Pak Soon-hyun about what had happened in the abattoir. And when he was done, Pak Soon-hyun took out his spectacles and wiped them with his shirt. Pak Soon-hyun looked up again and shook his head at the stout man. "I might still be a student, but I'm not dumb. You expect me to believe your bullshit story about a normal person dealing with a fire deer. I don't care whether you believe it or not. A deal is a deal. Pay up with $500 more for my troubles now or else." The stout man wasn't too pleased, and he started shouting. Pak Soon-hyun quickly held his arm at the stout man's neck. And within a few seconds, the stout man's eyes slowly closed. "He got drunk. So sorry for the commotion." Pak Sun-hun said, and he led the stout man out of the pub with his arm. Lucas followed behind as he saw Pak Sun-hun leading the stout man into the dark alley behind the pub. Pak Sun-hun raised one of his hands and his hand gave out a chilling wave of air, making the air turn into white mist. You can't even accomplish such a simple mission, and yet you dare to ask for more? He said as he pressed his hand onto the stout man's chest. Arg! The chill and pain on the stout man's chest made him wake up and cry out in pain. Pak Sun-hun didn't stop as he licked the side of his lips and savored the stout man's pain. Lucas wasn't too concerned with the stout man, but he knew it was the best opportunity for him to attack. He took off his coat and used it to cover his face. Thud! With all his might, he lunged at Pak Sun-hun and knocked Pak Sun-hun over, sending him sprawling across the dark alley. Clank! Bottles that were knocked over by Pak Sun-hun broke as they fell onto the ground. The stout man's eyes opened wide, and he wanted to thank Lucas, thinking that he was going to save him. Crack! To the stout man's surprise, Lucas gave him a punch to his chest, cracking his ribcage, and the stout man crashed into the wall behind him. Who are you? Pak Sun-hun helped himself up to his feet, with the help of the wall as he held onto it and stood up. Lucas didn't bother and he lunged at Pak Sun-hun again. Whoosh! This time Pak Sun-hun was ready, and he used his palm to strike at Lucas's head. Lucas could feel the chills coming at his face and he tilted his head and dodged Pak Sun-hun's palm strike. Pak Sun-hun's palm turned into a claw, and he pulled back his arms to claw at Lucas's neck from behind. Thud! Lucas gave Pak Sun-hun a frontal kick, sending him flying away. But Pak Sun-hun's claws that were engulfed with pointed ice grazed the skin of Lucas's neck, leaving a few trails of open wounds on Lucas's neck. Blood flowed out from Lucas's wounds, but the wounds miraculously healed and closed the very next moment. Chapter 7, Awaken Center. It was too dark for Pak Sun-hun to notice, and he tried to get up before Lucas hit him again. Whoosh! Pak Sun-hun suddenly flung an ice ball at Lucas, who was approaching him. The next moment, Lucas swung his arms and parried the ice ball away. Clank! The ice ball hit the wall and broke into pieces. Pak Sun-hun didn't stop and continued to fling ice balls at Lucas. Using his arms, Lucas tried to parry away as many ice balls shooting at him as possible. For those that hit, they didn't do a lot of damage to Lucas. His SSS-level physique was able to withstand such hits. While Lucas approached, Pak Sun-hun secretly conjured up an icicle in his hand, ready to stab it into Lucas's body. Finally, when Lucas got near Pak Sun-hun, Lucas feinted a punch and tried to give Pak Sun-hun a side kick to the head. Unaware of what Pak Sun-hun had in his hand, Lucas gritted his teeth as the icicle plunged into his leg. Lucas grabbed onto Pak Sun-hun's hand, which was holding the icicle, and tightened his grip. Arg! Let go of me, you sick man! Pak Sun-hun cried out in pain as his hand was crushed by Lucas. Crack! The sound of the bones cracking could be heard in the silent dark alley. Lucas then pulled out the icicle from his leg and plunged it into Pak Sun-hun's shoulder. Bladder! Blood splattered out from Pak Sun-hun's wound. Let go of me! Pak Sun-hun shouted, and he tried to use his remaining good hand to palm strike at Lucas. Lucas ignored the palm and let it hit his chest. The freezing cold from the palm tried to freeze his chest, but Lucas's body started to heal immediately. Ignoring what Pak Sun-hun was doing, Lucas stirred the icicle in Pak Sun-hun's shoulder, causing him tremendous pain. The intense pain caused Pak Sun-hun's knees to buckle, and he knelt. Hey! What are you doing? Lucas heard men shout from behind as he pulled back his fist, ready to give Pak Sun-hun another blow to his head. He turned around and saw around 10 men dressed in black suits. And on the left chest of their black suits was an emblem that was in the shape of an R. They were men from Jules Robertson's family. Lucas turned back and plunged the icicle deeper into Pak Sun-hun's shoulder before he ran away. He knew that these men were all awakened and not easy to deal with, so he didn't want to stay around and find out. Stop right there! Some of the men shouted and gave chase. They tried their best, but they weren't able to catch up to Lucas. Lucas, on the other hand, had the wound on his leg slowly closing up and he ran faster and faster. Damn! He is fast. The men panted and stopped when they lost sight of Lucas in the dark alley. They quickly got back to where Pak Sun-hyun was and tended to him. What did I tell you? Leave him to me. Jules Robertson's voice echoed in the dark alley. Jules, I was just trying to help. Pak Sun-hyun frowned as he held his shoulder and tried to pull out the icicle. Jules Robertson shook his head and threw a roll of bandage to Pak Sun-hyun. People like him are like cockroaches, disgusting and hard to kill, he said as he held his fingers up to his nose, as if the dark alley was polluting his body. To deal with Lucas, you need professional help, those with experience in dealing with cockroaches, Jules Robertson said as he narrowed his eyes looking out into the distance where Lucas had gotten out of sight. Pak Sun-hyun lowered his head and said, I'm sorry, Jules. Jules Robertson squatted down, held his hand on the injured shoulder of Pak Sun-hyun, making Pak Sun-hyun cringe from the pain, and said, It's all right. You were just trying to help. He smirked and stood up again. When Lucas got back home, he felt a sense of relief and got to cleaning himself up. Looking into the mirror, he could see that the wound on his neck was gone. It was as if it never happened. He rolled up the leg of his pants and checked the wound on his leg. It was the same as his neck, the wound was gone. This made him glad again that he had chosen the SSS-level physique ability. However, he knew it was best if he got another ability soon. After dealing with Pak Sun-hyun, he realized the versatility of the other abilities. Pak Sun-hyun was able to use his A-level ice ability for close attacks with his freezing palm and conjuring ice balls and icicles as long-range attack weapons. It would be perfect for him to couple an ability that was versatile like the ice ability with his SSS-level physique. He summoned the information panel in his mind and looked at it. Ding! Current slaughter points, 300/500. Host level 1. He was 200 slaughter points short of gaining another ability. Lucas decided that he might be able to earn the points at the Awaken Center or at the Abattoir. But his priority was to go to the Awaken Center to be qualified and registered as an Awakened first, to try and get Jules Robertson off his back. With the thought in mind, Lucas rested and slept for the night. The next day, when Lucas woke up, he took a quick breakfast and made his way to the Awaken Center. The Awaken Center was in the middle of the business center and Lucas had to take a bus ride there. He stood in front of the Awaken Center and marveled at how tall it was. It towered over the other buildings in the surrounding area and gave off a solemn feel with its dark and silver design. Chapter 8. Ability? There were guards in full gear with black armor and weaponry all over the area. Lucas didn't know what to expect and walked into the building. Inside the lobby, there were many people in different attires. Some wore khaki uniforms like adventurers, while some wore suits and stood around with their heads held high. They all had different insignias on their attire, and they stood around in groups. After Lucas entered the lobby, most of them took a quick glance at him with a confused look. He looked around and realized that he was the only young person who was high school age and alone. He ignored their glances and walked over to the counter. At the counter, a lady in a tight red dress, with the name tag Mandy on her chest, smiled and asked, "Welcome to the Awaken Center. How may I help you today?" Her superior, Sam, wasn't as friendly and he nudged her and whispered to her, "Don't waste too much time on him. Attend to the needs of the awakened." She gave his superior an awkward smile and turned her focus back to Lucas. "I'm here to test and register as an awakened," Lucas said. "Test and register for being an awakened? You didn't go through the awakening process at your school?" The lady in red asked. It was rare for someone to become an awakened by themselves. Her superior shook his head at what he heard, and he couldn't help it and said, "Shoo, go back to school and don't waste our time." Lucas shook his head and replied, "I got out of school just before the awakening process." "Got out of school? Expelled from school? Think we are a bunch of kids over here." The superior shook his head and said loudly. Those who were waiting in the lobby looked over in their direction. However, Lucas wasn't about to be intimidated. He knew from Bundy that they were legally obliged to attend to requests to test and register as an awakened. He stood his ground and said, "Don't try to patronize me. You are legally obligated to attend to my request. The others in the lobby nodded their heads and mumbled among themselves. This kid isn't like those high schoolers. Ha! He is surely much more well-versed in how things work than those studious kids. You think he is an awakened, though? They weren't sure whether Lucas was an awakened. Normal folks would have gone through the awakening process before leaving school. Unless you knew you weren't going to make it, or you had reasons for the school to expel you before the awakening process. They weren't sure about it, so they stood around, eager to find out the answer. Come on, Sam. You know the kid is right. Yeah. We have time to kill before the training rooms are ready. I bet this kiddo is just here to play a prank on you, Sam. Some wanted to see Lucas being tested, and some thought Lucas was here to prank Sam. It was the craze nowadays to come up with short videos on the HikHok platform for a shot at fame. Seeing that Lucas knew the rules and there were many awakened supporting him, Sam grumbled and said to Mandy, "You better take care of him in record time. I don't want any second wasted." Mandy gave an awkward smile to Lucas again, and she said to him, "May I have your ID, please?" Lucas did as instructed, and she began to enter his information into the system. Your ID is still linked to Greenwich High School, so the testing results might still be posted to the school system. Would that be fine with you? Lucas didn't think much of it, and he nodded his head. Come with me to the testing room. After she was done entering his information, she led him to a room by the side. Those who were in the lobby followed them and stopped outside the room. The room had a huge clear window, and they could see what was happening inside through it. Place your hand onto the device over there. Mandy pointed at a huge device in the room and said. Lucas did so, and she walked into a separated area. Don't worry, you won't feel a thing, she said as she pushed some levers and buttons that were on the control panel in front of her. The device started to give out a whirring sound, and a light beam glowed as it went through Lucas's hand. Those standing outside watched intently at the screen that was on the wall. Detecting. Subject determined to be awakened. Some of them cheered when they saw the word awakened on the screen. See, what did I tell you? Sam, come and check this out. You nearly missed out on an awakened, Sam. You know the penalty for it, don't you? Sam wasn't too pleased with the results and the taunts from the others. He grumbled and said, So what if he's an awakened? Most likely he had just awakened with a low-level ability. The others nodded as they knew the odds were in Sam's favor. Most of the awakened had low-level abilities. It was considered rare if you had an S-level ability. That was why Patricia had been showered with resources and all the opportunities Greenwich High School could afford. They looked at the screen again and watched intently for the result of Lucas's ability. Detecting. Subject's ability determined to be SSS level. Subject's ability? The crowd gave out a loud roar when they saw that Lucas had an SSS level ability. But they immediately went silent when they saw that Lucas's ability was determined to be. What did it mean to have an ability that was? Was the device faulty? Most people had abilities that were elemental like fire, ice, wind, earth, etc. Others had supplementary abilities like healing, poison, summon, etc. They had never in their lives seen the device detecting someone's ability as. Mandy tried all the buttons and levers she could think of, but it didn't change anything. The result for Lucas's ability was the same. She looked up and called out to Sam. Sam, I need your help. Chapter 9. Ice Wolf. Sam, who was by now shocked at the SSS level ability of Lucas, quickly came in and tried the same thing as Mandy did. Why isn't it working? He said with frustration as he kept pushing on one of the buttons. After a few moments of tampering and not getting any results, Sam looked up and walked over to Lucas. I'm sorry about the malfunction of the device. I will try to get the technical team on it. In the meantime, why don't you follow Mandy for the remaining procedure to register as an awakened? Sam bowed slightly and gave Lucas a wide smile as he said this. His attitude had changed ever since he saw the words SSS level on the screen. He would be more than dumb if he still gave Lucas any trouble. Any words of complaint from an SSS level awakened would cost him his cushy job in the Awakened Center. Lucas nodded his head at Sam. Different thoughts went through his mind about Sam's change in attitude. So, this is how it feels to be treated as an awakened, he thought. As he followed Mandy out of the room to the counter, the other awakened who were standing around gave him a nod or a smile too. Young man, if you want to, our team is open for you to join. Hey, I was here first. Don't listen to him, he's a stingy old fart. Join our team to get more cut for your hard work. All of you were doubting him just now. The nerve of you to be inviting him to your team right now. Some of them came up to him and asked for his contact. Even though they didn't know what ability Lucas had, they were eager to have Lucas on their team. Having an SSS level awakened would increase their chances of survival and increase their capability to try for more challenging missions. Thanks for the invitation. I still have lots to learn before I consider going out for missions. Lucas wasn't prepared for this popularity, so he smiled back at them and politely declined their invitation. He wasn't going to make a rash decision and join a team with fair-weather teammates. Mandy entered the results of the testing into the system, and after waiting for a few moments, an ID was generated from the printer by the side. She picked up the ID, put it into a leather enclosure, and passed it over to Lucas. Congratulations, Lucas. You are now officially an awakened. You can go to any of the training rooms to train and fight in the monthly rankings if you want to. Lucas took the ID and inspected the details. It displayed his level as SSS level, but had unknown for his ability. Monthly rankings? He was curious about the monthly rankings and asked. It's a ranking for the Awakened Center to gauge who are the strongest amongst the Awakened we have. There's a $10,000 reward for being first in the monthly rankings. Mandy explained about the monthly rankings patiently. Lucas was intrigued by the amount of the reward. He pondered for a moment and asked, "And what is the fight about?" "It's a simulated fight against demonic beasts. Don't worry, you could stop the simulation at any time if you sustain serious injuries. We have Awakened with healing abilities on standby," Mandy said. After his fight with the fire deer, Lucas had confidence in dealing with demonic beasts, so he proceeded to ask, "Can I have a go at it right now?" "You are more than welcome," Mandy said with a smile. Lucas wanted to make himself as valuable to the Awakened Center as possible. This should get Jules Robertson off his back and allow him to get stronger until he was able to deal with the Robertson family by himself. The other Awakened in the lobby were also pleased as well. Now they could find out how strong Lucas was and what his ability was. And if he did well with fighting the simulated demonic beasts, they would spare no resources to try and get him on board their team. So, they followed closely behind Lucas and Mandy as Mandy led Lucas to a training room. They stood outside and watched closely at Lucas through the big clear window of the training room. "Please wait while I start the training sequence," Mandy said, and she closed the heavy-duty door to the training room. Lucas stood inside the room and waited. A voice boomed from the speaker in the ceiling. "Initiating training sequence. First round starts now." In the further end of the room, a beam of light projected downwards onto the ground. Lucas got ready as he saw a figure appear in the beam of light. Growl. He heard a growling sound as the light dissipated. A demonic beast that looked like a wolf with white fur and two tails appeared. It didn't waste any time and lunged at Lucas. As it got nearer, Lucas could feel the chill in the air. Whoosh! He took a step to the side and the ice wolf missed him by an inch. However, it was not over as Lucas saw two icicles appear out of nowhere and shoot at him. Thud! He quickly rolled on the ground, and the icicles missed and smashed into the walls, breaking into smaller pieces of ice. Lucas also took the opportunity and grabbed onto one of the tails of the ice wolf. He stood up, holding onto the tail of the ice wolf and started to turn around in circles. The ice wolf tried to retaliate, but it realized that it was overpowered by Lucas. The very next moment, the ice wolf was hurled into the air and spun around as Lucas kept turning his body in a circle. When Lucas felt that the velocity of the spin was good enough, he let go of his hand and the ice wolf smashed into the huge window of the training room. It gave out a loud bang. Chapter 10. Poison Scorpion. Crack. Sounds of bones cracking could be heard when the ice wolf smashed into the window pane. The reinforced glass rattled from the impact and a trail of blood was left as the ice wolf slid down from the window pane. Lucas didn't waste any time, and he lunged at the ice wolf, giving it a kick in the belly. The pain caused the ice wolf to let out a whimper. He squatted down, and with his hands held onto the ice wolf's upper and lower jaws. With all his strength, he started to pry the mouth of the ice wolf open. Crack. When the jawbone was fractured as Lucas opened it beyond its limit, a loud crack could be heard. Finally, Lucas ripped the jaws apart from the ice wolf. The voice from the speakers boomed again. Ice wolf eliminated. Initiating sequence for the second round. The body of the ice wolf dissipated, and it was gone the next moment. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 100. Current slaughter points, 400/500. Host level 1. He was pleasantly surprised by the system's notification. It was a bonus to him that killing these simulated demonic beasts also allowed him to gain slaughter points. After a surge of energy that came into his body calmed down, he turned his focus back to the training simulation. Lucas stood up and turned towards the light beam projecting down. Outside the training room, the other awakened were chattering and giving cheers to what they had witnessed. That was fast, wasn't it? I didn't expect him to be so ruthless and decisive. How did he do that? And does anyone have any clue what ability he was using? They were impressed with what they saw. Although Lucas was young and looked inexperienced, they were astonished by his clinical approach to fighting the demonic beasts. So many times, they had seen young and upcoming awakened with high-level abilities freeze when faced with a demonic beast. Even when it's a simulated one in the training room, all of them started to reach for their phones and started texting. I need you to find information on this guy. Listen, there's someone with SSS-level ability and hasn't joined any team yet. Does anyone have contacts in Greenwich High School? They reached out to their informants to figure out who Lucas was. If they were able to fulfill Lucas's desires, maybe he would be willing to join their team, they thought. Meanwhile, Sam was checking the device with the technical team. They weren't able to find anything wrong with the device after several rounds of testing. Sam. Maybe the guy really has some unknown ability, the engineer of the device said as he looked at the status of the device. Everything was in an okay status marked in green. You might want to report it to your superiors. The engineer patted Sam's back and left. Sam swallowed a mouthful of saliva and nodded his head. He could only pray for Lucas to be benevolent and not be vengeful toward him for what he did. With his phone, Sam began to tap on the Contacts app and scrolled to a contact named Awakened Center Director. He took a deep breath, tapped on the contact and placed the phone to his ear. After a few rings, the person on the other side picked up the phone. This is the secretary for the director. What is the purpose of your call? I think that's something the director should be aware of, Sam said and briefed the secretary on the situation. Finally, a man with a deep voice took over the phone on the other side and said, Thanks, Sam. I am looking at the CCTV footage of the training room as we speak. Unaware of what was happening outside, Lucas focused on the next demonic beast to appear. This time it was a poison scorpion that was huge, with its body the same size as an adult human being. It thrust its sting on its tail at Lucas. Lucas quickly leaped out of the way. Sizzle. When the sting landed on the ground, the venom from the sting started to burn through the concrete ground of the training room, giving off white smoke. Lucas ran to the side of the poison scorpion and then punched the armored body of the poison scorpion. Crack. The thick armor of the poison scorpion cracked, and it swung one of its front claws at Lucas, trying to get him away from it. Thud. Lucas took the hit and held onto the front claw of the poison scorpion. He lifted his leg and kicked at the body of the poison scorpion. With the force from his kick, he pulled hard on the front claw of the poison scorpion. Bladder. The next moment, he yanked the front claw of the poison scorpion out of its body. Pain traveled through the body of the poison scorpion, and it started to try to get away from Lucas. However, the training room was only about as big as half a football field, and it couldn't get far. Lucas gave chase and he leaped onto the back of the poison scorpion. He grabbed onto the armor that was covering the back of the poison scorpion, and he ripped the armor plates out from the body of the poison scorpion. Bladder. Some liquid splattered out from the body of the poison scorpion and got onto Lucas's body. He tried to burn through his skin but couldn't do so as his skin healed immediately. The others gasped as they could only see smoke rising from the poison burning Lucas's skin. They watched intensely to see if Lucas was all right. Much to their relief, when the smoke subsided, Lucas had his hand plunged into the body of the poison scorpion. The sound from the speakers in the ceiling then sounded again. Poison scorpion eliminated. Initiating sequence for the third round. The body of the poison scorpion dissipated the next moment. Lucas panted and caught his breath as a familiar sound erupted in his mind. Chapter 11, Wind Bear. Ding! Slaughter point plus 100. Current slaughter points, 500/500. Congratulations on leveling up. Host level, 2. Please select new ability. 1. SSS level fire ability. 2. SSS level water ability. 3. SSS level wind ability. 4. SSS level shadow wielder. Lucas felt that familiar feeling of his energy getting stronger as he tried to catch his breath. All of a sudden, he felt that he was twice as powerful as before. He read through the different choices for his new ability and pondered the pros and cons of each ability. The elemental abilities were relatively common and known. It would be easy for his enemies to neutralize his elemental ability if he chose one of them. Jules Robertson might just get someone with water abilities to counter his fire abilities, for example. So he was leaning towards the last option. Shadow Wielder. It was a rare ability and Lucas had never heard about it before. When he thought about it, another information panel popped up in his mind. SSS level Shadow Wielder. Allows host to use his shadow to control a single enemy initially. The enemy will follow the actions of the shadow accordingly. Host's shadow would be as powerful as the host himself. Add this as new ability? Y/N. Lucas silently thought yes in his mind. He felt another gust of energy entering his body at the very next moment. Imagery and knowledge about using the Shadow Wielder ability entered his mind. A familiar sound erupted in his mind again. Ding! Current slaughter points, 0/1000. Host level, 2. Current abilities, 2. SSS level physique. SSS level Shadow Wielder. Meanwhile, in front of him the light beam appeared again. Roar! After the light beam disappeared, a huge figure standing tall on its hind legs gave out a huge roar and stared at Lucas with its small eyes. It was a demonic beast that looked like a bear with a huge gust of wind surrounding it. Whoosh! The wind bear swung its paws at Lucas, sending out a slicing wave at him. Lucas quickly dodged to the side, but the end of the slicing wave caught his left arm, and it sliced it open. Drip. Blood started dripping from the wound. But the wound closed immediately now that he was at level 2. The awakened outside the training room shook their heads at what they saw. It was a good run for a beginner. This guy has such bad luck encountering the wind bear in the third round. I remember I could only finish the first round before giving up. Most of them couldn't even finish the second round the first time they tried their hand at the training sequence. They were impressed with Lucas and didn't expect him to go further than round 3. The director of the Awaken Center also shook his head at what he saw. What was I thinking? He got too excited with the news that there was an SSS level awakened in his Awaken Center and forgot about how Lucas might be inexperienced in dealing with the demonic beasts. However, Lucas had his own plan. He lunged at the wind bear, ignoring its attacks using its paws to hurl slicing waves at him. Using his arms to block the slicing waves, he got near the wind bear. The wind bear pawed down at him with its huge front paws. Lucas held his arms up and stopped the front paws. Drip. Blood started to drip down from his arms and fell onto the ground. The awakened watching outside the training room sighed and shook their heads. Humph. He should have been more calm. The lack of experience shows, I guess. If he joined my team, I would guide and show him the way to deal with such situations. Lucas was being too young and rash, they thought. The director of the Awaken Center lit up his cigar and puffed a mouthful of smoke from it. They watched intensely to see how Lucas would get out of this quagmire. The wind bear tried to push down its front paws at Lucas, but it was not able to do so. Lucas's strength was much more powerful than its strength. Unknowingly, Lucas also activated his shadow wielder ability. His shadow, when it touched the wind bear's shadow, moved on its own. Eerily, Lucas's shadow grabbed onto the shadow of the wind bear's front paw and pushed it away from Lucas. The wind bear's front paws followed suit, and the front paws swung away from Lucas. Lucas made use of this opening, and he lunged at the wind bear and gave a punch to the wind bear's head. Crack. A loud cracking sound could be heard when Lucas's punch hit the forehead of the wind bear. Roar. The wind bear roared out in pain, and it swung its front paws around aimlessly, trying to get Lucas away from itself. Lucas leaped to the side of the wind bear and his shadow grabbed onto the shadow of the wind bear's front paws. The wind bear's front paws stopped swinging around immediately. Lucas then lunged at the wind bear's head and punched the forehead again. Bladder. This time the head of the wind bear exploded and splattered the flesh and white matter all over the place. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 150. Current slaughter points 150/1000. Host level 2. Current abilities 2. SSS level physique. SSS level shadow wielder. Lucas saw the information panel and was pleasantly surprised. He didn't expect the training sequence to be able to let him gain so many slaughter points. The voice from the speakers in the ceiling boomed again. Wind bear eliminated. Initiating sequence for the 4th round. The Awakened watching outside the training room gasped in surprise. The 4th round. It had been a very long time since anyone could get to the 4th round. Most of them, even very experienced fighters, would give up at the 3rd round. Things started to get interesting. The director of the Awaken Center leaned forward and took a puff from his cigar. He looked up at his secretary and said, "Get me all the information about this young man. Cancel my meetings for the day." He had a hunch that it was best for him to put in whatever resource and effort on Lucas. Chapter 12. Breaking the record? Is he still going? I don't know. He doesn't seem to want to quit yet. Where does he get all his energy? The Awakened standing outside were amazed at Lucas's endurance. If it was them, they would have been dead tired after the 3rd round of battle. Unknown to them, Lucas's energy was replenished bit by bit whenever he earned more slaughter points. So Lucas wasn't about to give up soon. One of the Awakened watching suddenly realized something and he said, "Who is the top-ranking Awakened now? What's the record for the most rounds currently?" His question created an uproar as they took out their phones to have a glance at the rankings. The top-ranked Awakened was someone familiar to them. It was Riley Kane, an SSS-level Lightning Awakened. The best and most powerful Awakened they had in the Southern Battle Administration area. And his record stands at 5 rounds in the training sequence. This meant that Lucas only needed to get through 2 more rounds to beat Riley's record. Everyone got excited at the realization. One of Riley's friends in the crowd sent him a message. Bladder. A demonic beast turned into a red mist after lightning had hit it. Riley panted as he tried to regain his energy. His SSS-level lightning ability was one of the most powerful, but the downside to it was that it used up too much energy. He felt his phone buzz in his pocket. "At this time when I'm on a mission?" Riley grumbled as he flicked his long blue hair to the back of his head. After he took out his phone and read the message, he frowned at what he saw. "A rookie trying to break my record? Interesting," he said and tapped on the video that was sent. Riley watched the video of Lucas fighting with the Ice Wolf and pondered. He couldn't figure out Lucas's ability, only guessed that it had something to do with Lucas being strong. But those who had abilities that granted them inhuman strength were mostly A or S level ability users. It definitely wasn't the case with Lucas. His eyes narrowed and he grinned at the prospect of having a worthy opponent. Things were getting boring for him at the top. Back in the training room, The light beam disappeared, and the next demonic beast revealed itself. It was an ox that was burning with flames all over its body. Lucas immediately felt the temperature of the training room increase. Beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. The ember ox blew out fumes of smoke from its nostrils and kicked at the ground. Tremble. The ground shook as the ember ox charged at Lucas with its head lowered. Fire shot out from the ox's horns and scorched the surroundings. Lucas leaped to the side and got out of the way of the ember ox. The flames caught his sleeve, and he quickly patted the flames to put them out. Thud. While he did so, the ember ox turned and charged at him. The horns ripped through his waist, and he held onto the horns of the ember ox. Slide. The ember ox pushed and caused Lucas to slide along the ground. After taking a deep breath, he pushed back at the ember ox with all his might. The ember ox stopped and took a step back from the enormous resistance from Lucas. It blew out fumes of smoke from its nostrils as it tried to fight back against Lucas. Lucas's shadow grabbed onto the shadow of the ember ox's front feet and pulled hard. The ember ox became unbalanced and stumbled forward as its front feet got pulled by Lucas's shadow. Lucas hammered down onto the ember ox's head with his fists. Thud. His fists landed and a muted thud could be heard. The ember ox shook its head, trying to regain consciousness. Flames shot at Lucas from its horns. Lucas crossed his arms to cover his body from the flames. Sizzle. He felt the pain on his arms as they got burnt. Thud. Lucas turned his body to the side and lunged at the ember ox. He hit the ember ox's head and sent it stumbling back a few more steps. Slowly, the skin on his arms healed, and the burn wounds were gone. Smash! Lucas hammered down on the ember ox's head. He didn't stop and raised his fists again. Thud, thud. As he smashed down over and over again, blood flowed out of the ember ox's eyes and nose. Finally, Lucas grabbed onto the horns of the ember ox, and he hurled the ember ox away. The ember ox flew into the air and smashed into the wall. Pieces of cement fell onto the ember ox as it slid down the wall. Lucas leaped into the air, and he kicked the ember ox's head. Crack. The impact from his kick fractured the skull of the ember ox. It knocked out the ember ox, and the ember ox closed its eyes and fell to the ground. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 150. Current slaughter points 300/1000. Host level 2. Current abilities 2. SSS level physique. SSS level shadow wielder. The voice from the speaker in the ceiling also boomed as the ember ox dissipated. Ember ox eliminated. Initiating sequence for the 5th round. When the awakened watching outside the training room heard the announcement, they got into a frenzy. He did it. You think he can win this round? Oh my God. I need to get him on my team. Who would have thought a rookie would get up to the 5th round of the training sequence? Lucas was now at the same round as Riley, the strongest awakened in the Southern Battle Administration area. They knew that they might be witnessing a historical moment. The director of the Awakened Center stood up and paced around. He was also getting excited. Taking a deep breath from his cigar, he puffed out a long puff from it. He gave a huge grin, turned to his secretary and said, "Call the principal of Greenwich High School. Chapter 13, Water Gorilla. Congrats, Albert. I feel so envious of having such a talented student," the director of the Awakened Center said after his secretary passed him the phone. "Rodney? What do you mean by that?" Albert, the principal of Greenwich High School, asked as he was confused by the sudden greetings from Rodney, the director of the Awakened Center. "You should know what I mean." Rodney took a puff of his cigar, grinned and said. Albert pondered for a moment and said, "Well, having a student with S-level ability is definitely great." He had misunderstood Rodney and thought that Rodney was talking about Patricia with her S-level fire ability. S-level? No, I'm talking about the student, or more precisely ex-student, with SSS level ability. SSS level ability? Albert quickly turned on his computer and checked the system. And there it was, at the top, Lucas with his SSS level ability. Below Lucas was Patricia with her S-level fire ability. Albert frowned at the screen, and he said, "I've got a meeting coming up. Talk to you next time." This pesky Rodney was still sore about him and his wife. His wife had always rejected Rodney, but Rodney just wouldn't give up. But Albert wasn't in the mood to deal with Rodney right now. He put down the phone and clicked on the details of Lucas. Lucas was indeed one of the top students until his funding got cut and he left Greenwich High School. Bang! Albert banged on the table, and he called the staff in charge of Lucas's class and funding into his office. He wanted to figure out what had happened and to get to the bottom of it. Having a SSS-level student meant that their chances in the high school finals would be the highest in the history of the high school. But now it was all gone due to someone cutting off the funding for Lucas. He also asked for Patricia to come to his office. Maybe Patricia can help persuade Lucas to come back to the school, he thought. After a few moments of waiting, Patricia arrived at the door of his office. "Principal, you were looking for me." Patricia knocked softly on the door of Albert's office and waited. "Come in." Patricia entered and the principal gestured for her to take a seat in the chair in front of his office desk. She sat and looked at the principal nervously as she didn't know what to expect. It was rare for her to be called into the principal's office. "I hope I didn't break any rules," Patricia said and lowered her head. "Break any rules? No. I summoned you to ask you about Lucas. How much do you know about his SSS-level ability?" Patricia, startled, opened her mouth slightly and froze for a moment. What? Lucas had awakened, and on top of that, he had awakened a SSS-level ability. She tugged at the corner of her blouse and bit her lip. No wonder Lucas didn't return my message. They were now worlds apart, she thought. Ahem. Albert gave a cough after seeing her in a daze. His cough worked and it knocked her out of her thoughts. She lifted her head and started to talk about her interactions with Lucas. When she was done, Albert drummed his fingers on the desk repeatedly. He had more or less figured out what happened to Lucas. Jules Robertson isn't someone he can easily get rid of. His family is a big donor to the high school. The board of the school wouldn't be too pleased if he messed it up. He will have to first try and persuade Lucas to come back. See if Lucas was willing to ignore what Jules Robertson did to him. Albert looked at Patricia and said, "Patricia, I need your help." Outside the training room, the crowd looking on waited anxiously as the light beam projected onto the ground. If Lucas survived this round, he would be on par with Riley Kane, the current leader in the monthly rankings. They held their hands to their mouths as the light beam slowly disappeared, revealing a huge standing figure that remained. Thump. The figure thumped on its chest with its fists. It was a water gorilla. The water gorilla took a deep breath, and it stared at Lucas. When Lucas took a step forward, the water gorilla opened its mouth, and a water spout shot out from it. The water spout sliced through the ceiling of the training room and onto the ground, leaving a trail of broken cement along the way. Lucas leaped away and stepped onto the wall near him. He kicked hard at the wall, making use of the force, and he shot at the water gorilla like a bullet. However, the water gorilla quickly reacted, and it was engulfed in a wall of water the next moment. Lucas's momentum was slowed down by the wall of water, and his fist just touched the arm of the water gorilla. The water gorilla held up its arm and clapped its palms together at Lucas's head. Clap. The clap missed as Lucas ducked away by squatting down. Splash. The water wall that surrounded the arms of the water gorilla splashed into tiny water droplets. These weren't any ordinary droplets as they penetrated through the cement on the ground, walls, and ceiling. Thud. The water droplets, however, weren't powerful enough to cut through the skin of Lucas. Red marks appeared all over Lucas's skin as the water droplets bounced off his tough skin. Lucas, in his squatted position, leaped and, using his forehead, went for the water gorilla's chin. In such a short distance, the water gorilla wasn't able to react in time to this attack. Thud. Lucas's forehead hit the water gorilla's chin and its head tilted back, and it took a few steps away from Lucas. Crack. Lucas pulled back his fist and then punched at the water gorilla's chest with all his might. A loud crack of the ribcage could be heard as Lucas's fist landed on the water gorilla's chest. Chapter 14. Round 6. The crowd outside the training room gasped out loud as they saw the water gorilla getting hit. Could Lucas really do it, matching Riley's achievement? The water gorilla had other plans as it opened its mouth and shot out a water spout at Lucas. Bladder. Lucas held up his arms to block the water spout, but it sliced his arms open, tearing through the skin and bones of his arms. Arg! He quickly gave the water gorilla a frontal kick to the fractured ribcage of the water gorilla. Thud! The impact forced the water gorilla to stumble a few more steps away from Lucas. Took in a deep breath. Lucas saw it doing so and he quickly rolled away to the side. Slice! The water gorilla opened its mouth and shot out a water spout, slicing its way through the training room, trying to catch up to Lucas. Luckily, Lucas was too fast for it, and he stood up next to the water gorilla by its side. By now, his arms had healed, and he lunged at the water gorilla's head. Splash! The water gorilla protected itself with a wall of water engulfing its body. The punches that Lucas threw at it only caused the wall of water to splash around. Roar! With a loud roar, the water gorilla swung its huge arms at Lucas. Lucas ducked by squatting and the arms of the water gorilla missed him by an inch. Unknowingly, his shadow moved and held onto the shadow of the water gorilla's arms. Lucas then plunged his hands into the wall of water and grabbed onto the eyes of the water gorilla. Bladder. The next moment, he gouged out the eyes of the water gorilla. This caused the water gorilla to thrash around in pain and stumble around the training room aimlessly. Lucas got to the back of the water gorilla. He waited for an opportunity as the water gorilla was giving all that it had. First, a water spout sliced all over the training room. Then the water gorilla hurled out huge balls of water. And when the balls of water exploded in the air, the small droplets of water penetrated the surroundings. Lucas avoided being wounded by staying at the back of the water gorilla. This went on for a few minutes as the water gorilla unleashed its anger blindly at Lucas. Finally, when the water gorilla got tired and all it could do was swing its tired arms in slow motion, Lucas then knew it was time for him to go in for the kill. Using his shadow wielder ability, he made use of his shadow to grab onto the shadow of the water gorilla's arms. He then came forward to the water gorilla's front and he thrust his fist at the chest of the water gorilla. Bladder. His fist broke through the ribcage of the water gorilla and the flesh and innards of the water gorilla splattered out from behind. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 200. Current slaughter points 500/1000. Host level 2. Current abilities 2. SSS level physique. SSS level shadow wielder. The voice from the speakers in the ceiling boomed again. Water gorilla eliminated. Initiating sequence for the 6th round. The crowd of awakened looking into the training room couldn't believe what they saw, and they gave out a huge cheer. He did it. Can't believe a rookie equaled Riley's record. So, will he give up and stop the training sequence? Hey! No smoking inside here. One of the awakened got too excited and he wanted to light up a cigarette but was stopped by the security personnel. The crowd took out their phones and quickly messaged their friends about what they had just witnessed. Riley's friend also did the same and sent a message to him. When Riley got the message, he and his team were clearing the battlefield. Riley brushed his hands along his long blue hair and said to himself, "Interesting. I must meet this Lucas when I get back." "What's so interesting, Riley?" one of his teammates asked, but Riley only shook his head and gave his teammate a smile. His teammate shrugged as he was used to Riley being secretive by himself. He didn't dare to say much as the team's success depended heavily upon Riley's contributions. Back at the training room, Director Mandy was surprised when she saw the gray-haired Rodney, with his cigar in his hand, approaching her. "What's the progress now?" Rodney asked as he looked into the training room's large clear windows. "He has beaten the 5th round and is on to the 6th round. If he wins the 6th round, then he would be the top-ranking awakened in the monthly ranking." Mandy briefed the director on Lucas's progress. Rodney nodded his head at the impressive feat of Lucas. He watched attentively as the light beam projected down onto the ground. The crowd held their breath and watched intensely as the light beam slowly disappeared. He better hope it's not an ember elephant. No, how could anyone be so unlucky? You never know how devious the training sequence is. They mumbled amongst themselves and wished that Lucas wouldn't meet an ember elephant for the 6th round. The ember elephant was one of the toughest demonic beasts to kill. And usually it would take a whole team of awakened to be able to deal with an ember elephant. If Lucas really encountered an ember elephant in the 6th round, then it was more or less game over for Lucas. Oh no! One of the awakened exclaimed as the light beam slowly disappeared. He recognized the large figure and the trumpeting sound. It was unmistakably an ember elephant. All of them shook their heads and gave out a long sigh. What an unlucky fellow Lucas was, they thought. Well, I think he better give up now. Yeah, being on par with Riley isn't too shabby. He better stop the training sequence now before he gets trampled on like a meat pie. Chapter 15. Ember Elephant. Lucas felt that familiar sense of energy getting stronger inside him. He got ready for the next challenge as the light beam disappeared and unveiled the ember elephant standing tall at twice the height of Lucas. The ember elephant gave out a loud trumpet and swung its trunk at Lucas. Flames blew out of the trunk as it swung by. In an instant, the flames engulfed the whole area, leaving no room for Lucas to escape. He could only cover his head and get down onto the ground to try and get out of the way of the flames. Scorching heat got onto his skin, burning it, and he could feel the pain from it. Lucas endured the pain, and he started to run towards the ember elephant when the trunk of the ember elephant was finally out of the way. Raising one of its feet, the ember elephant tried to stomp onto Lucas to stop him. The shadow from the foot got bigger as the foot came down onto Lucas. Bam! Pieces of cement flew all over as the foot of the ember elephant stomped onto the ground and crashed through the concrete ground. However, Lucas was unscathed as he had leaped to the side in the nick of time. Swipe. The ember elephant used its trunk to swipe Lucas off its body as he tried to climb onto the ember elephant's body. Lucas was hurled away and tumbled across the ground. Before he could react, he felt a gust of heat wave coming at him from behind. The ember elephant had flung huge fireballs at him. Boom! Fireballs hit onto the ground and exploded. Luckily for Lucas, the ember elephant's aim wasn't great and most of the fireballs missed. One of them exploded near Lucas and the debris and flames from the fireball hit onto Lucas's back. Some of it pelted into his back and blood started to ooze out of his wounds. I knew it. He'd better stop the training sequence now before he gets hurt. Shoo. Let's see if he can still pull it off. I think you just want him dead and have less competition. The crowd of awakened watching on outside the training room weren't too optimistic about Lucas's chances. It was as they expected. No one can easily defeat an ember elephant by themselves. Rodney, the director of the Awakened Center, took a puff of his cigar and narrowed his eyes. He wanted so much for Lucas to defeat the ember elephant. The better Lucas did in the training sequence, the more painful it would be for Albert. Why isn't he wearing any armor? Rodney turned over to Mandy and asked. Mandy shook her head and said, he was just tested and registered as Awakened. I didn't have time to let him purchase the appropriate gear. The cigar smoke covered Rodney's face as he gave out a long puff from his cigar. Later, when he is done, gift him a set of the latest armor. Pay for it with the budget for the young talented Awakened. Mandy opened her eyes wide as she was surprised. The budget for Talented Awakened was reserved for young Talented Awakened, and it had never been used by the director before. Not even Riley Kane had this privilege. She took note of this and told herself to treat Lucas well in her mind. I will make sure he gets the best gear, Mandy replied, and she looked into the training room. Lucas had stood up and stared at the ember elephant from afar. Pieces of the debris that got pelted into his back started dropping out as Lucas's SSS-level physique began to heal his wounds. The ember elephant lowered its head and with its tusks, charged at Lucas. Tremble. The ground of the training room shook with every step the ember elephant took. Lucas tried his best to stay on his feet and he had to move against the wall for support. Whoosh. When the Ember Elephant got near, it took in a deep breath and blew out flames from its trunk. Lucas was ready for it, and he leaped up into the air. The flames rose and nearly caught up to him. He kicked against the wall and lunged himself horizontally towards the Ember Elephant. Swipe. The Ember Elephant tried to swat Lucas away from the air with its trunk. But it was too late as Lucas slipped by and landed on its back. What? Did you see that? Keep quiet and focus. Go, rookie. Teach that Ember Elephant a lesson. The Awakened looking on cheered for Lucas when they saw him land onto the back of the Ember Elephant. Rodney walked closer to the clear glass separating where he was in the control room from the training room. He leaned forward and put his cigar into his mouth. A grin appeared as his lips curled up. Lucas sat onto the neck of the Ember Elephant and grabbed onto the ears of the Ember Elephant with his left hand. The Ember Elephant tried to turn its head vigorously to get him off its back. But it was to no avail as Lucas held onto the ear of the Ember Elephant and stayed on its back. The Ember Elephant then charged at the walls of the training room. Bam! The training room shook as the huge body of the Ember Elephant slammed into the wall. Gasp! The crowd of Awakened looking on from outside gasped as the huge clear window of the training room wobbled from the impact. Fortunately, the reinforced glass was able to withstand the impact. The Ember Elephant tried to smash into the walls again, but Lucas pulled back his fist and with all his strength punched down at the Ember Elephant's head. Crack! A loud cracking sound could be heard when Lucas's fist hit onto the head of the Ember Elephant. Pain scorched through the Ember Elephant's body. It went berserk and charged around aimlessly. Boom! The training room shook. Lucas pulled back his fist and got ready to punch down onto the head of the Ember Elephant again. Chapter 16. Armor and Weaponry. Lucas punched down at the same spot with his fist. Splatter. This time, his fist plunged through the fractured skull of the Ember Elephant and the tissue and flesh splattered out from the head. The pain was too unbearable for the Ember Elephant, and it fell sideways onto the ground. Lucas quickly jumped out to avoid getting his legs crushed by the weight of the Ember Elephant. When he landed next to the Ember Elephant, he used his shadow and held onto the shadow of the trunk. With a tug, he ripped out the trunk of the Ember Elephant from its head. Flames started to sprout out from the Ember Elephant's head uncontrollably. The flames started to latch onto the Ember Elephant and the Ember Elephant started burning. The smell of charred meat filled the air immediately. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 250. Current slaughter points 750/1000. Host level 2. Current abilities 2. SSS level physique. SSS level shadow wielder. He did it. Riley's record has been broken. I think we've witnessed history right here. The crowd standing outside couldn't believe their eyes and they gave out a loud cheer. Lucas really did it. He was able to not only be on par with Riley's record but also break it. 7th round. 7th round. 7th round. They started to chant for Lucas to challenge the next round. However, before the voice from the speakers in the ceiling boomed again, Lucas turned his head to Mandy and raised his hand. I think that's enough for the day, Lucas shouted. Breaking the record was enough and he didn't want to stand out too much. Having Jules Robertson on his back was enough trouble for him. Getting the $10,000 reward was his priority. Mandy nodded her head and pressed a button on the control panel. The body of the Ember Elephant dissipated, and the voice boomed again. Ending training sequence at the 6th round. Well done, and please try again for better results. The crowd of Awakened looking on didn't anticipate Lucas stopping at the 6th round, and they were left to digest what had happened. They started to mumble amongst themselves. I think it's on. I need to get him on our team. Your team which has never accomplished any missions for the past few months? Humph. You guys are still thinking about it, while the smart ones have already reached out to his friends in his high school. Some of the Awakened who had an information network managed to fish out information about Lucas. And they had already sent out their men to dig out information about Lucas from his classmates. It was a rush to see who could get Lucas to join their team. When the door of the training room opened, They wanted to rush up to talk to Lucas. Security guards of the Awaken Center came in and stopped them. "Step back, or else we will use lethal force." The security guards in their gear and weapons warned the crowd of Awakened. Lucas, when he stepped out of the training room, was surprised at the reception. "Better lie low for a while before coming here again," he thought silently to himself. Clap. "Congratulations on a first go at the training sequence. The result was the best we had for a very long time actually." Rodney clapped and gave Lucas a handshake. Lucas tilted his head at the unfamiliar old man. "Oh, excuse me and let me introduce myself. I'm Rodney Smith, the director for the Awaken Center in the Southern Battle Administration area," the director said, and his cigar smoke filled the air. One of the Awakened wanted to voice out that smoking was not allowed, but his compatriot nudged him to keep his mouth shut. Rodney Smith was known to be eccentric and wasn't one to follow the rules at times. "Pleased to meet you, Director Rodney." Lucas greeted the director and Mandy came over. The director patted him on his shoulder and passed him a name card. "If you bump into any troubles, give me a call and I shall try to settle it for you," the director said, and Lucas kept the name card. This was what he came to the Awakened Center for. Now, with his identity of being an Awakened and the top in the monthly rankings, Jules Robertson would have to think twice before he tried something on Lucas again. Seeing that Lucas kept the name card, the director waved farewell at Lucas, and he walked away. "Mr. Lucas, if you are free, follow me to choose your battle gears," Mandy said. "Battle gears?" Lucas asked, as he wasn't sure what it meant. Mandy gave him a smile and said, "We have the latest and greatest armor and weaponry to help you in your missions dealing with the demonic beasts." Lucas frowned and asked, "But I might not be able to afford it." "Don't worry, Mr. Lucas. The director has promised to use the budget for the young talented Awakened for your gear." When the crowd heard what Mandy said, they gasped out in envy of Lucas. "For free? Did I hear the budget of the young talented Awakened?" "Yes, you heard correctly. This young man has a bright future ahead of him." They were envious of the fact that Lucas had the privilege of getting the latest and greatest battle gears with the budget for young talented Awakened. To have enough to afford the latest battle gears, they had to work hard and accomplish risky missions before they could even afford a part from the body armor. And now, Lucas was about to be gifted a whole bunch of armor and weaponry free of charge. They could only look on in envy as Mandy led Lucas to the lift. The security guards had to form a wall to stop the crowd of Awakened from trying to pass their contacts to Lucas. Lucas shook his head at their enthusiasm. He had better join a team worthy of his ability soon to get them off his back. Mandy smiled and pressed the lift button for the 3rd floor, marked with the words, "Armor and Weaponry," by the side. Chapter 17, Demonic Beast Core. As the lift went up, Lucas wanted to ask about the reward for the monthly rankings. "Mandy, for the reward of being top in the monthly ranking, you will have to wait for one more week when the month ends before you can get the $10,000 reward. But since you've reached the 6th round in the training sequence, $600 has already been credited to your bank account." Mandy smiled and replied before he could finish his sentence. "Thanks." Lucas nodded and was glad that he now had $600 to tide him over till the end of the month. He turned his focus back to getting his armor and weaponry. Ding! They arrived at the 3rd floor and the lift door opened. It was an area about the size of a football field with many rows of racks filling up the area. Lucas glanced around and marveled at the huge selection of armor and weapons that were on the racks. Some of the armor was heavy-duty for maximum protection against attacks, and some was much more lightweight, providing less protection but more mobility to the wearer. Mandy introduced and briefed him on the different types of armor. Finally, a special-looking piece of armor caught Lucas's eye. It was enclosed in a glass cube. The armor looked to be lightweight and its surface was pure dark, like the night sky. "This is the latest armor from our research unit, the Dark Matter Vault armor. It gives the wearer maximum flexibility and movement. The protection it provides makes you resilient against physical attacks and provides some protection against elemental attacks. But most importantly, it's made from a special material that we've obtained from space. You can store items within the virtual space within the armor. Virtual storage? Lucas was very interested in the storage attribute of the armor. Protection wasn't his highest priority as his SSS level physique had given him that. It would sure be nice for him to have armor where he could store his loot when he went out on missions. Can I have this? Lucas pointed to the dark matter vault armor and said, Sure. That's what the director instructed. Mandy took out her staff card and placed it on a small platform in front of the dark matter vault armor. The glass cube that was enclosing the dark matter vault began to open up and Mandy gestured with her hand for Lucas to take it. Lucas walked up to the dark matter vault armor and lifted it. It was surprisingly lightweight, only as heavy as a cotton shirt. You can try to place items into it through the opening on the chest plate, Mandy said and pointed at the chest plate of the dark matter vault armor. Lucas took out his phone and placed it near the chest plate. A glow appeared from the chest plate and a virtual space appeared inside Lucas's mind. He placed his phone into the virtual space and miraculously his phone disappeared from his hand. He used his hand to reach into the chest plate and the virtual space appeared in his mind again. His phone was lying there where he had placed it earlier. After he picked up the phone and took his hand out of the chest plate, his phone appeared in his hand again. This would certainly come in handy, Lucas thought. He held the dark matter vault armor in his hand and said, This would certainly do. Maybe it's time for me to pick my weapons. Sure. Mandy nodded and led Lucas to the racks that held the weaponry. There were pistols, rifles, and machine guns available. Lucas hesitated as he looked at the unfamiliar guns. Don't worry. Being an awakened one entitles you to have a license to carry. Training to use the guns will be provided by the Awakened Center. Mandy interjected to relieve Lucas of his worries. He glanced at the different weapons and he decided to go for a pistol. As he didn't know what to expect, a pistol seemed like a much more flexible weapon for beginners like him. Lucas picked up one of the pistols and a few boxes of bullets. With his strength from the SSS level physique, he wasn't too worried about the recoil. He kept the pistol and bullets in the dark matter vault armor. Next, it was time to choose some auxiliary weaponry. Mandy led him to racks that had different items on them. Tasers, grenades, knives, staffs, and even nunchakus were available. Lucas glanced at the items and went through the racks one after another. Finally, he stopped at one of the racks that was filled with smoke grenades. He figured that the smoke grenades would work well with his SSS level Shadow Wielder ability. His enemies wouldn't know what hit them if he attacked them with his shadow amidst the thick smoke. I think I'll get these. Lucas pointed to the rack with smoke grenades and said, Feel free to do so. Mandy nodded and said. She then frowned as she saw Lucas clearing the rack clean of all the smoke grenades. He patted his hand on the dark matter vault armor when he was done storing the hundreds of smoke grenades into the virtual storage space of the armor. Mandy gave him an awkward smile as she didn't expect him to wipe the whole rack of smoke grenades clean. However, she didn't say much as it was the instructions of the director. She then led Lucas to a room that was secured with steel walls. After she pressed a button on the wall, a platform rose in the middle of the room. In the middle of the platform, an opening opened up and a crystal appeared from within. Mandy picked up the crystal and said, This is what we call a demonic beast core. It's harvested from the demonic beasts and rewards will be given if you bring them here to the Awakened Center. She passed the demonic beast core over to Lucas and said, But most of the Awakened don't exchange all of their demonic beast cores for rewards. Lucas, with the demonic beast core in his hand, looked up at her and asked, Why? Chapter 18, Dangers Out There. Mandy looked at Lucas expecting him to feel something. But Lucas just glanced at her with one of his eyebrows arched, waiting for her to respond. You don't feel anything with the demonic beast core in your hand? Am I supposed to? Lucas tilted his head and asked. Mandy scratched her head as this was unexpected. Awakened should be able to draw the energy from the demonic beast core and make themselves stronger. You should be feeling the energy from the demonic beast core going into your body. She explained to Lucas what was supposed to happen for all the Awakened. She had no clue as to why Lucas wasn't able to feel anything from the demonic beast core. "I don't feel anything," Lucas said as he held the demonic beast core much more tightly in his hand. After a few moments of not feeling anything, he gave up and placed the demonic beast core back onto the platform. It seemed like the only way for Lucas to get stronger was to earn slaughter points and level up with them. "I guess I will have to exchange all the demonic beast cores I harvest for rewards," Lucas shrugged and said. At least he would be able to earn rewards from them. Mandy sighed and nodded. "All right, that's all I have for you. With your new identity as an awakened, you can now leave the city and go on missions to clear out the surrounding demonic beasts. A word of caution, the demonic beasts are far more smart and cunning than those in the training sequence. Beware," she said, and Lucas followed her back to the lift. Ding! When they reached the lift lobby, the lift door opened, and a familiar face was waiting for them. "Lucas, there you are. Here, please have a cup of coffee." Sam bowed to Lucas and held up his hand, which was holding a cup of coffee. He was eager to make things right after what he had done earlier. But Lucas wasn't going to waste his time and entertain him. He just kept going, and Sam was soon swarmed by the crowd of awakened trying to get Lucas into their teams. With the help of the security guards, Lucas was able to leave the awakened center with his dark matter vault armor. He hopped into a cab and instructed it to bring him back home. When he got back home, he sat in his tiny dark room and took some time to digest what had happened during the day. His fortunes had been turned and things certainly looked bright for him. The only issues were the threat from Jules Robertson and the fact that he couldn't make use of the demonic beast core to become stronger. And he decided not to appear at the Awaken Center within the next week. It was time for him to lie low from all the attention. He took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Bundy, how are things at the abattoir?" Lucas's plan was to go to the abattoir and continue to gain slaughter points. After all, he was only 150 points away from the next level up. Bundy was surprised that Lucas would call him again. He was suspicious that Lucas had become an awakened and Lucas would most likely not be in contact anymore. After all, the life of an awakened meant high risks and riches. "Everything's fine. I'm alive and kicking right now. Do you still have a job for me at the abattoir tomorrow? You know what? Let's meet up for a nice dinner." Lucas recalled how Bundy had tried to save him when the fire deer went berserk. "Heh, sure. Meet me at the Orange Diner in an hour," Bundy said, and Lucas agreed. He put down the phone and started to make his way to the Orange Diner. When he arrived at the Orange Diner, the warm glow from the lighting made him feel comfortable and warm. Bundy was already seated, and he raised his hand and waved at Lucas. Lucas walked over to the table, and he was glad to see Bundy again. He saw Bundy had a few stitches on his shoulder and face. "Long time no see." Lucas sat down and started to order all the expensive dishes from the menu. It was the least he could do for Bundy. "That's enough. I'm on a diet nowadays." Bundy tried to stop him, but Lucas ignored him. When he was done, the waitress quickly went to the kitchen to get the chef started with the many dishes. Soon, the dishes were ready, and they started to feast on them. "Oh my! Haven't had such tender steak for a long time," Bundy exclaimed as he cut through the thick and juicy steak he had in front of him. "I could order more if you want," Lucas said. Bundy stopped what he was doing, and he leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, are you an awakened now?" Bundy looked at Lucas directly in the eyes and asked. Lucas gave him a smile and nodded. "Ha! I knew it." Bundy was all smiles and happy for Lucas. He frowned after a moment and asked, "Then why do you want to work in the abattoir again? You should be out clearing the demonic beasts." "My awakened ability is too low level, and I don't have a team that wants me. So, I have to earn some money in the abattoir first." Lucas gave some excuses and said. Bundy frowned and pondered. He recalled Lucas as being quite powerful, but he could understand how he would be ostracized by the other awakened. As painful memories from his past flashed through his mind, Bundy knew he had to give Lucas some advice. These awakened teams aren't what they seem to be. Out of the city and its no man's land. They would sometimes kill the others, or even their own team members for their demonic beast cores. You'd better be careful out there when you join one of the teams. Lucas nodded and took note of what Bundy had said. He prepared the smoke grenades for the demonic beasts, but now it seemed like they could be used on the other Awakened too. Chapter 19. Edric Robertson. Bundy agreed to arrange for Lucas to come to the abattoir to work the next day. Lucas thanked him, and after they finished the sumptuous dinner, he went back home. When he walked up the dark staircase filled with rubbish and that smelled like an open toilet, he sensed someone standing at his door. He reached for his pistol as he slowly took more steps up the stairs. As he got nearer, he recognized the figure, and he put the pistol back into his pocket. Lucas. Hi. Patricia waved at him with an awkward smile. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be preparing for the high school tournament's final? Lucas took out his key and waited for Patricia to move out of the way. The principal asked me to come to invite you back to the school. Wait, no. I would have come to persuade you on my own. You have a much brighter future ahead if you come back. Everything will be planned out nicely for you, Patricia said, trying to persuade Lucas. Sorry, but everything has been so far behind for me. I'm not interested in going back, Lucas said without any emotion. Shaking his head and letting out a sigh, Lucas took a step forward and brushed Patricia aside. Things were going well for him right now, and he wasn't about to go back and be dealing with Jules Robertson every day. Patricia was shocked at his response. Lucas had always been competitive with her, but never had he ever tried to push her away. As the light in the ceiling flickered, she realized that Lucas now seemed different. He was much more determined than before. The Lucas of old would have invited her into his place and discussed the possibility of going back. But no, this Lucas just rejected her and walked past her. She felt something in her chest as she saw Lucas using his key to open the door and enter his place without looking at her. It was a feeling she had never felt before in her life. How could he be so cold toward her? They used to banter with each other about who was going to be the top student. Maybe she should have tried to help Lucas by asking for help from her parents when he was on the verge of being expelled. That must be it, she thought. Lucas must have been angry at her for not giving him a helping hand. As the door to Lucas's home closed, and the corridor's light kept flickering, she bit her lip and made a decision. She would go back and ask her father for help. The next day, Lucas went to the abattoir to work. Even though his phone was filled with incoming messages asking him to join an Awakened team, he blocked all of them and figured they must have gotten his contact from his schoolmates. Bundy was happy to see him back at work, and they got to work handling the larger livestock. Remember what I've told you. Be quick and don't hesitate, Bundy said as he signaled for the control room to release the livestock. Lucas nodded and he got ready. The entrance opened and a cow came trampling through the path. Bundy got ready by the side to help Lucas. But Lucas, with just one hand, held onto the cow's horn and stopped the cow in its tracks. Dust was kicked up by the sudden jerk and it filled the air. Lucas, with his other hand, thrust the knife he was holding at the cow's throat. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 10. Current slaughter points 760/1000. Host level 2. Current abilities 2. SSS level physique. SSS level shadow wielder. 10 slaughter points. Lucas said silently to himself. It wasn't much compared to the training sequence, but it would be consistent and much easier. And on top of that, it wouldn't draw any more attention to himself. You are so much stronger than before. Bundy was surprised at the ease with which Lucas had dealt with the cow. He patted Lucas's shoulder, and he could feel how much more hardened and strong Lucas's physique was now. All right, next. After dealing with the innards of the cow, Lucas was ready for the next livestock. Slaughter points plus 10. Slaughter points plus 10. Slaughter points plus 10. Things went smoothly for the day, and he summoned the system's information panel. Ding! Current slaughter points 870/1000. Host level 2. Current abilities 2. SSS level physique. SSS level shadow wielder. He was close and he figured he would be able to level up after the next day. He what? How is that possible? Jules Robertson shouted frustratedly at Pak Soon-hyun. Pak, who was sitting on a lavish red leather sofa across the room in Jules Robertson's living room. He had just briefed Jules Robertson on Lucas's situation. What riled Jules Robertson up the most was how the principal had asked Patricia to go and beg for Lucas to come back to the school. What's this ruckus about? A man's voice boomed, and Jules Robertson and Pak Soon-hyun immediately kept quiet. It was Edric Robertson, the richest man in the Southern Battle Administration area and father of Jules Robertson. Father, I think it's time to get rid of Albert as the principal, Jules Robertson said, trying to persuade his father. Edric Robertson, who was a fit man for his age at 40, took off his shades and stared at Jules Robertson. Pak Soon-hyun stopped breathing and sat upright. All that he could think of was getting out of the place. Edric Robertson took a deep breath and slowly said, I told you not to bring attention during this period. Did I not tell you that? I don't have time for your high school romance drama. Jules Robertson lowered his head and said softly, Yes, father. Good. Be a good boy and wait till everything is settled before you go on a teenage lust rage. Edric Robertson said and glanced over at Pak, giving him a smile. Study hard and get good grades. Yes, sir. Pak cowered in fear as he tried to lower his profile. Chapter 20 Out of the City. Edric Robertson got out of the living room and his phone buzzed. He took out the phone from his pocket and read the message. Everything is in place. We can commence the operations a week later. The devices to attract and enrage the demonic beasts to form a beast horde is on their way. They can be deployed when they arrive. He read the message and grinned at the prospect of the operation succeeding. If he was able to do so, he would be able to buy over all the land after the demonic beasts had rampaged through it. And he could become even much richer than he was now. Maybe even richer than the bastards in the Northern Battle Administration area. Edric Robertson tapped on a contact named Shadow Lotus. He typed in the input box, I've done my part of the deal. Make sure you deliver your part of the deal. Kill the Southern Pillar. Take over those in governance and give me the green light to buy up everything when the time comes. He tapped on send and waited for the reply. It will be done. The contact named Shadow Lotus replied back immediately. Edric Robertson kept his phone and walked over to the balcony. He marveled at the scenery of the whole of the Southern Battle Administration area. Soon, everything shall be mine, he thought to himself with a grin. The next day, Lucas went to the abattoir to work again. He was only 130 slaughter points away from leveling up and gaining another new ability. Lucas worked together with Bundy, with Lucas dealing with most of the slaughtering. Why did you retire from being an awakened? Lucas asked Bundy to know more and to pass the time. It's a long story. Bundy sighed and he looked out into the distance. Memories came flooding back into his mind. He glanced over to Lucas and said, I'm not sure if you were born yet, but 20 years ago, demonic beasts started to amass outside of the wall. Demonic beasts that weren't spotted in the surroundings could also be seen. They were able to stay close to each other in peace, something that they don't usually do. Then suddenly, all the demonic beasts attacked and overwhelmed the defense systems. As an awakened, my team and I were tasked to protect the city. But there were just too many. Bundy's eyes watered up as he recalled what happened next. My team members were all killed. I sustained a life-endangering injury. Miraculously, I survived, but it made me unable to use my ability for a long amount of time, which was why I had to retire. Bundy lifted his hand, and it glowed for a moment before petering out. I'm so sorry, Lucas said. He took note of what Bundy said about the demonic beast horde as it might come in handy in the future. Bundy patted him on his back and said, It's all right. Life still has to go on. Lucas nodded, and after a moment of pondering he asked, Does anyone know what caused the beast horde? Bundy shook his head and said, There was some research from the Awaken Center, but the researchers disappeared. News from the Awaken Center was that they had deserted to one of the enemy nations. Deserted, Lucas said to himself. It sounded fishy to him, but he didn't think much about it as he had something more important for him on hand. As he slit the throat of the cow he was handling in his hand, a familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 10. Current slaughter points, 1000/1000. Congratulations on leveling up. Host level 3. Please select new ability. 1. SSS level Ice ability. 2. SSS level Earth ability. 3. SSS level Wind ability. 4. SSS level Summoner. He looked at the new abilities available and the first 3 abilities were an immediate pass for him. He didn't want any elemental abilities for now as his enemies could easily neutralize them with an opposing elemental ability. With that in mind, he selected the SSS level Summon ability. More information about the ability appeared in his mind. SSS level Summoner. Allows host to have a pact with any type of demonic beasts, even legendary and god tier. With the pact, host would be able to summon the demonic beast to fight at will. Add this as new ability? Y/N. Lucas thought silently yes in his mind. A surge of energy entered his body and knowledge about how to go about with the SSS level Summoner came into his mind. He could feel himself being twice as strong as he lifted the body of the cow onto the moving hook. He had nearly thrown the body of the cow onto the ceiling with his newfound strength. Time for me to venture out of the city and get my first summoned beast, Lucas thought to himself. He could try and kill off the demonic beasts for their demonic beast cores. With the demonic beast cores, he could then get rewards for them and have funds to purchase weaponry and essential items. And if he found a demonic beast that was suitable, he could have a pact with it to be his first summoned beast. With that in mind, he told Bundy that he would rest for the next day. Bundy didn't think much of it and he agreed. Lucas woke up early the next morning. He put on his dark matter vault armor, a duck cap and face mask, packed some water and rations into the storage space. After that, he took a long bus ride to the edge of the city. It was an hour-long ride, and when the bus got near the tall cement walls of the city, protecting the people inside from the demonic beasts that stood tall, the bright morning sunlight was blocked out by the wall, giving a cool shade for the people below. Passengers on the bus had the same purpose as Lucas. Go out and clear the demonic beasts in the surroundings. They worked in teams and Lucas was the odd one out being there alone. Next, one by one, the soldiers at the checkpoint called out to those in the queue.